Playing with Power MTG. Powerful cards, powerful formats. Before we get into today's video, I wanted to tell you about our sponsor, Factor. Factor is a meal service that takes the hassle out of meal prep and planning. Unlike other meal services, Factor cooks your meals ahead of time, so it arrives ready to heat and eat within minutes. But this isn't just some fast food or TV dinner style service. These meals offer fresh, never frozen ingredients across a variety of preferences. There are over 25 meal options each week, so you'll never get tired of the meals delivered to your door. Nowadays, the only quick options are unhealthy fast food or over-processed, stale-tasting frozen dinners. Factor's meals ensure you always have something nutritious and delicious on hand. It gives you time back to focus on the things you love to do. So give Factor a try today. Use my link or go to go.factor75.com and use code POGPWPJUN50 for 50% off of your first box. Once you click, my description will live update to count up the purchases. A big thanks to Factor for sponsoring today's video. Now, let's start out by showcasing our fighters this evening. First, we have our Mox Pro patron Peter, piloting Kirik, son of Yawgmoth. This is a storm deck that uses Kirik to reduce the cost of its spells and attempts to find a win as fast as possible. Peter's opening hand contains a Vampiric Tutor, Reanimate, Bloodstained Mire, Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, Buried Alive, Wishclaw Talisman, and his London Mulligan is a Flesh Writher. Next, we have our Mox Pro patron Sean, piloting the partner pair of Dargo the Shipwrecker and Thrasios Triton Hero. This deck uses Dargo to generate infinite mana and draw its deck with Thrasios. Sean's opening hand contains a Spellseeker, Lion's Eye Diamond, Chrome Mox, Verdant Catacombs, and his London Mulligans are Island, Mental Misstep, and Mox Opal. After that, we have Mike, piloting Najeela the Blade Blossom. This is a Turbo Naz deck that uses Najeela to combo with cards like Derevi Imperial Tactician. Mike's opening hand contains a Windswept Teeth, Demonic Consultation, Tainted Pact, Ad Nauseam, Talisman of Dominance, and his London Mulligans are Gitaxian Probe and Mystical Tutor. Finally, we have Ryan, piloting Godo, Bandit Warlord. This deck uses Godo to generate infinite combats with Helm of the Host. Ryan's opening hand contains a Thunderclap, Jaxus the Troublemaker, Red Elemental Blast, Chrome Mox, Ancient Tomb, Snow-Covered Mountain, and a Mana Vault. His sticker sheets this game are Unglued P-Brain Dinosaur, Eldrazi Guacamole Tightrope, and Train Blessed Mind. Without further ado, let's kick off this drastic, daring, delectable divergence. Peter opens the One Ring to rule them all and gets to start us off. Peter draws for turn and plays an Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. He passes. Sean draws and plays a Verdant Catacombs. He casts a Chrome Mox, Imprinting Spellseeker. He casts a Lion's Eye Diamond. He ships the turn to Mike. Mike draws and plays a Windswept Teeth. He taps his Windswept Teeth for a black through Urborg. He casts Demonic Consultation. In response, Peter casts Vampiric Tutor. He fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. Demonic Consultation resolves and Mike names Mana Crypt. He exiles cards from his library until he reveals a Mana Crypt, putting them into his hand. He casts Mana Crypt. He casts Talisman of Dominance. He ends his turn. Ryan draws and plays an Ancient Tomb. He casts Chrome Mox, imprinting Red Elemental Blast. He taps his Ancient Tomb to help cast a Mana Vault. He casts Jaxus the Troublemaker. He gives the turn to Peter. Peter draws and casts Jeweled Lotus. He plays a City of Traders for turn. He sacrifices Jeweled Lotus and pays 6 life to help cast his commander, Kirik, son of Yawgmoth. He pays 2 life through Kirik to help cast Buried Alive. Kirik triggers and gets a +1/+1 counter. He fetches up a Hoarding Broodlord, Vilis Broker of Blood, and a Razaketh the Foulblooded into his graveyard. He pays 2 life to cast Reanimate, targeting Vilis. Kirik triggers and gets a 1/1 counter. Vilis enters and Peter loses 8 life. Vilis triggers and Peter draws 8 cards. He activates Vilis twice, paying 8 life through Kirik, targeting Jaxus. Vilis triggers and Peter draws 8. Then Jaxus gets -2/-2. He casts Mox Amber. He pays 2 life to cast Cabal Ritual. Kirik gets a counter. Peter draws 2 through Vilis, then adds 3 black. He pays 2 life to help cast Demonic Tutor. Kirik gets a counter. Peter draws 2, then he fetches up a card into his hand. He pays 2 life to cast Sacrifice, sacrificing Vilis as an additional cost. Kirik gets a counter. Peter draws 2 through Vilis, and then he adds 8 black. He casts Exhume. Kirik gets a counter, and then Peter returns Vilis to the battlefield. He pays 2 life to cast Wishclaw Talisman. Kirik gets a counter, and Peter draws 2 through Vilis. He activates Wishclaw Talisman, fetching up a card into his hand and giving Wishclaw to Ryan. He pays 2 life to cast Grey Merchant of Asphodel. Kirik gets a counter, Peter draws 2 through Vilis, and Grey Merchant resolves. It enters, and each opponent loses 8 life, and Peter gains 24. He casts Grim Monolith. He pays 4 life to cast Dark Petition. Kirik gets a counter, Peter draws 4 cards through Vilis, and then Dark Petition resolves. He fetches up a card into his hand and adds 3 black. He casts a Lotus Petal. He casts Culling the Weak, sacrificing Grey Merchant of Asphodel as an additional cost. Kirik gets a counter, and then Peter adds 4 black. He pays 4 life to help cast Professor Onyx. Kirik gets a counter, Peter draws 4 through Vilis, and then Onyx resolves. He pays 2 life to cast Chain of Smog, targeting himself. Kirik, Vilis, and Professor Onyx triggers. Each opponent loses 2 and Peter gains 2. He draws 2 through Vilis, then Kirik gets a counter. Peter presents a loop of copying Chain of Smog, targeting himself, discarding 2 cards, and Professor Onyx triggering each time. He does this over and over, draining his opponents until they are dead, and Peter wins the game. In this game, Sean's opening hand contains a Tinderwall, Soul Ring, Spellseeker, Bergie God of Storytelling, An Offer You Can't Refuse, Gamble, and his Linda Mulligan is a Veil of Summer. Mike's opening hand contains a Tarnished Citadel, Esper Sentinel, Lotus Petal, Birds of Paradise, Dockside Extortionist, and his Linda Mulligans are Demonic Consultation and Badlands. Ryan's opening hand contains 3 Snow-Covered Mountains, Thunderclap, Dockside Extortionist, Basalt Monolith, Felwar Stone, and his sticker sheets this game are Ancestral Hot Dog Minotaur, Trained Blessed Mind, and Unglued Pea-Brain Dinosaur. Peter's opening hand contains a Final Parting, Dark Ritual, Swamp, Marsh Flats, and his Linda Mulligans are Lotus Petal, Lion's Eye Diamond, and Praetor's Grasp. And Sean gets to start us off. Sean draws for turn and was punished for his super risky keep. He takes no game actions and passes to Mike. Mike draws and plays a Tarnished Citadel. He taps it to help cast Esper Sentinel. He casts Lotus Petal. He casts Birds of Paradise. He ends his turn. Ryan draws and plays a Snow-Covered Mountain. He casts Mox Opal. Esper Sentinel triggers and Ryan pays. He ships the turn. Peter draws and plays an Ancient Tomb. He gives the turn to Sean. Sean draws, again takes no game actions, and passes, discarding to hand size. Mike draws and moves to combat. He attacks Peter with Esper Sentinel. Peter takes it, and in his second main phase, Mike plays a Scalding Tarn. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up an Underground Sea onto the battlefield. He casts his commander, Najeela the Blade Blossom. He ships the turn to Ryan. Ryan draws and plays a Snow-Covered Mountain. He casts a Felwar Stone. Esper Sentinel triggers and Mike draws. He ends his turn. Peter draws and plays a Swamp. He casts Dark Ritual and Mike draws through Esper. Then Peter adds 3 black. He taps his Ancient Tomb to help cast Buried Alive. He fetches up Razaket the Foul-Blooded, Villas Broker of Blood, and a Hoarding Broodlord into his graveyard. He casts Mana Crypt. He pays 6 life to help cast his commander, Kirik, son of Yawgmoth. He ends his turn. Sean draws and finally finds what he needed. He plays a Windswept Teeth. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Taiga onto the battlefield. He casts a Tinderwall. He sacrifices Tinderwall, adding 2 red. He casts a Soul Ring, and Mike draws through Esper. He casts Gamble. He fetches up a card into his hand and then randomly discards Bergie, God of Storytelling. He casts an Arcane Signet. He casts a Mystic Remora. He gives the turn to Mike. Mike draws and plays an Exotic Orchard. He casts Dockside Extortionist. Dockside enters and Mike creates 6 treasures. He moves to combat and attacks Peter with Najeela and Ryan with Esper Sentinel. Najeela triggers and Mike creates a warrior tapped and attacking Ryan. Both players declare no blocks and in response, Mike activates Najeela. He untaps his creatures and they gain lifelink, trample, and haste. Then Mike gets an additional combat. Peter and Ryan take the hit and Mike gains 5. He moves to his additional combat and attacks Peter with Najeela and Ryan with a warrior and Esper Sentinel. Najeela triggers, creating 2 warriors tapped and attacking Ryan. Peter and Ryan take the hit and Mike gains 5 again. Mike passes. Ryan draws and plays a Snow-Covered Mountain. He casts his own Dockside Extortionist. In response, Mike sacrifices 3 treasures to add a blue, green, and a white. Dockside enters and Ryan creates 5 treasures. He casts a Metal Worker. He ships the turn. During his upkeep, Peter wins his Mana Crypt flip. He draws and pays 4 life to help cast Final Parting. Kirik, Remora, and Esper trigger. Mike and Sean both draw, and in response to Kirik, Ryan casts Thunderclap for its alternate cost, sacrificing a mountain targeting Kirik. Remora and Esper trigger, Ryan pays for Esper, and Sean draws off of Remora. Then Kirik dies, and Final Parting resolves. Peter fetches up a card into his hand and Grey Merchant of Asphodel into his graveyard. Severely set back, he gives the turn to Sean. During his upkeep, Sean lets his Remora die. He draws and casts a Mana Crypt, letting Mike draw through Esper. He casts Imperial Recruiter. Recruiter enters and Sean fetches up his own Dockside Extortionist into his hand. He casts Dockside. In response, Ryan sacrifices 2 treasures, adding 2 red. Dockside enters and Sean creates 7 treasures. He casts an Underworld Breach. He escapes Bergie, God of Storytelling. He casts Goblin Bombardment. Bergie triggers and Sean adds a red. He casts his commander, Dargo, the Shipwrecker, reduced through his treasures. Bergie triggers and Sean adds a red again. He sacrifices Dargo through Bombardment, dealing 1 damage to Peter. He recasts Dargo, adding a red through Bergie. Sean presents a loop of sacrificing Dargo through Goblin Bombardment, dealing a damage to an opponent, then recasting it, reduced through the previous sacrifice, adding a red through Bergie each time. He does this over and over, until the table is dead, and Sean wins the game. In this game, Mike's opening hand contains a Polluted Delta, Marsh Flats, Jeweled Lotus, Rite of Flame, Lotus Petal, Demonic Consultation, and his Linda Mulligan is a Chrome Mox. Ryan's opening hand contains 3 Snow-Covered Mountains, Cursed Mirror, Helm of the Host, Mox Diamond, Dockside Extortionist, and his sticker sheets this game are Trained Blessed Mind, Playable Delusionary Hydra, and Phyrexian Midway Bamboozle. Peter's opening hand contains an Ancient Tomb, Dauthi Voidwalker, Hoarding Broodlord, Cabal Ritual, Jeweled Lotus, Asmodeus the Archfiend, and a Wishclaw Talisman. Sean's opening hand contains a Phyrexian Altar, Worldly Tutor, Chain of Vapor, Viseju Who Endures, Mindbreak Trap, Scalding Tarn, and an Arcane Signet. And Mike gets to start us off. Mike draws for turn and plays a Polluted Delta. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up an Underground Sea onto the battlefield. He casts a Lotus Petal. He casts a Rite of Flame, adding 2 red. He casts a Rhystic Study. He casts a Jeweled Lotus. He sacrifices his Lotus to help cast his commander, Najeela the Blade Blossom. With a crazy start out of the gate, Mike passes the turn. Ryan draws and plays a Snow-Covered Mountain. He casts a Mox Diamond. Rhystic Study triggers and Ryan pays. Diamond resolves and he discards a Gemstone Caverns. He gives the turn to Peter. Peter draws and casts Jeweled Lotus, letting Mike draw. He plays an Ancient Tomb. He taps his Ancient Tomb, sacrifices his Jeweled Lotus, and pays 6 life to help cast his commander, Kirik, son of Yawgmoth. Rhystic triggers and Mike draws again. Peter pays 4 life to cast Dauthi Voidwalker. Kirik and Rhystic trigger, Mike draws, and Kirik gets a counter. He pays 2 life to help cast Witchclaw Talisman. Mike draws, and Kirik gets another counter. With nothing else, Peter ships the turn. Sean draws and plays a Scalding Tarn. He casts no spells and passes. At the end of Sean's turn, he reminds everyone to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment about your favorite part of tonight's game. Mike draws and plays a Marsh Flats. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Tundra onto the battlefield. He moves to combat and attacks Ryan with Najeela. Najeela triggers and Mike creates a warrior tapped and attacking Ryan. Ryan takes the hit, and in his second main phase, Mike casts a Soul Ring. He ends his turn. Ryan draws, plays a Snow-Covered Mountain, and ships the turn. Peter draws and taps Ancient Tomb to help activate Witchclaw. He fetches up a card into his hand and gives the Monkey's Paw to Ryan. He pays 2 life to help cast Cabal Ritual. Kirik and Rhystic trigger, Mike draws, and Kirik gets a counter. Then Peter adds 3 black. He casts Balthor the Defiled, letting Mike draw and putting a 1/1 counter on Kirik. In response, Sean cracks his Scalding Tarn, pays a life, and fetches up a Volcanic Island onto the battlefield. In a bold move, Sean casts Chain of Vapor, targeting Rhystic Study, trying to force Mike to interact. Rhystic triggers and Mike draws. In response, Mike casts Snap, targeting Dauthi Voidwalker. Dauthi bounces and Mike untaps 2 lands. Still in response to Chain, Mike casts Deflecting Swat for its alternate cost, targeting Chain of Vapor. Swat resolves and Mike changes the target of Chain to Kirik. Chain resolves, bouncing Kirik. In another bold move, Peter sacrifices Ancient Tomb to copy the Chain, targeting Rhystic Study again. Rhystic gets bounced and Mike ends the chain. Then Balthor finally resolves. Next, Peter casts Lion's Eye Diamond. Knowing that this is a huge problem, Sean responds by casting Mindbreak Trap for its alternate cost, exiling LED. With his plans foiled, Peter passes the turn. Sean draws and plays Beseiju, who endures. He casts an Arcane Signet. He casts Ragavan Nimble Pilferer. He gives the turn to Mike. Mike draws and plays a Flooded Strand. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Volcanic Island onto the battlefield. He moves to combat and attacks Ryan with Najeela and his warrior token. Najeela triggers, creating 2 warriors tapped and attacking Ryan. Ryan takes the hit, and in his second main phase, Mike recasts Rhystic Study. He ships the turn. Ryan draws and plays a Snow-Covered Mountain. He activates Witchclaw Talisman, fetching up a card into his hand and giving Witchclaw back to Peter. He casts Dockside Extortionist, paying for Rhystic. Dockside enters and Ryan creates 4 treasures. He casts Treasonous Ogre, letting Mike draw through Rhystic. In response, Mike casts Silence. Silence resolves, then Treasonous Ogre resolves. Unable to cast any spells, Ryan ends his turn. Peter draws, takes no game actions, and passes. During his upkeep, Sean casts Worldly Tutor, letting Mike draw through Rhystic. He fetches up his own Dockside Extortionist onto the top of his library. He draws and casts Dockside. Mike draws through Rhystic, Dockside resolves, and Sean creates 4 treasures. He moves to combat and attacks Mike with Ragavan. Mike takes it, Ragavan triggers, Sean creates a treasure, and Mike exiles a Final Fortune. In his second main phase, Sean casts Dargo, sacrificing Ragavan, Dockside, and a treasure as an additional cost. Rhystic triggers and Mike draws. He casts Jessica's Will, choosing both modes, targeting Mike, paying for Rhystic. In response, Mike casts Demonic Consultation. It resolves and Mike names Fierce Guardianship. He exiles the top 6, then exiles all but the last 10 cards, putting Fierce Guardianship into his hand. He casts Fierce Guardianship for its alternate cost, countering Jessica's Will. With nothing else, Sean gives the turn to Mike. Mike draws and plays a Tarnished Citadel. He casts Mox Diamond, discarding Gemstone Caverns. He casts Grand Abolisher. With no answers, it resolves, locking out opponents. He taps Tarnished Citadel to help cast a Tinderwall. He casts Talisman of Curiosity. He sacrifices Tinderwall, adding 2 red. He casts Samut, Vizier of Noctamoon. He moves to combat and attacks Peter with Najeela, Samut, and 3 of his warriors. Najeela triggers, creating 5 warriors tapped and attacking Peter. Peter blocks one of the new warriors with Balthor and takes the rest. Samut triggers 5 times and Mike draws 5 cards. Mike sighs because he still cannot find his Thassa's Oracle. In his second main phase, he casts a Mox Opal. He casts the Mystic Remora. He ships the turn. Ryan draws and casts Curse Mirror. Esper and Remora trigger, and Mike draws 2. Mike knows that this is a Dockside Extortionist and pleads with the table to counter it. No one does, and Curse Mirror resolves. Mirror enters as a Grand Abolisher. With the table now locked out, Ryan activates Treasonous Ogre, paying 3 life, adding a red. He casts Grim Monolith, and Mike declines his Rhystic triggers. Ryan activates Treasonous Ogre, paying 9 life, adding 3 red. He casts his commander, Godo, Bandit Warlord. Godo enters, and Ryan fetches up a Hammer of Nazan onto the battlefield. Hammer triggers, and Ryan equips it to Godo. He pays 12 life to activate Treasonous Ogre, adding 4 red. He casts Helm of the Host. It enters, hammer triggers, and Ryan equips Helm to Godo. He moves to combat, creating a copy of Godo. He attacks Sean with Godo, getting in additional combat. Sean takes it, and Ryan moves to his extra combat, creating another Godo. He repeats this process to get infinite combat steps, killing the table, and Ryan wins the game. Ladies and gentlemen, what a fun set of games. Congrats to Peter, Sean, and Ryan on their wins tonight. In Game 1, Peter kept an insanely quick opening hand and won before anyone else could set up. In Game 2, Sean kept a risky no-land hand, but got paid off and won with a clean Burgie and Goblin Bombardment combo. In Game 3, Ryan did a great job of waiting until everyone else had spent interaction before winning with Godo and Helm. The most valuable card in tonight's games, sponsored by Luxury Playstyle, goes to Dockside Extortionist. This card generates so much mana, and it is very easy to recur or blink. It even feeds your opponent's Docksides, causing everyone to start casting them one after another. It is one of the best cards in the whole format, and it is a great reason why red is super explosive. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Tune in next time when we duke it out to see who will be king of the competitive EDH table. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.